to Ignite Your Power, the Kathy Mou Podcast. I am so excited today because I have my first guest ever, and today is this is Black History Month. So I'm having Morgan Gray. She has her own podcast as well, Afrocentric, but she is all about Black history. And so I brought the pro here today to talk to us about a very cool topic that I wanted to dive deep about hoodoo. So Morgan, hi, thanks for for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Kathy. I can go ahead and introduce myself. Like you said, my name is Morgan. I am the creator and hostess of the Afrocentric podcast. The purpose of my podcast is to help decenter people from Eurocentric thought as well as to view the world from an Afrocentric perspective. If you cannot tell by my very luxurious and illustrious accent, I am from the very humble state of Mississippi. I'm a graduate of Mississippi State University. I have a degree in history. I am an advocate as well as an all around just educator. I love history in general. So I'm just happy to be here.
Yay! Thanks for spending your time with us. And so today's topic, like I mentioned, is going to be about hoodoo. And so can you talk a little bit and introduce us about what is hoodoo and what is the difference between hoodoo and voodoo, right? We've all heard of that term, and I just was curious, I know they're completely different things.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's actually a really great question. So that is the first thing to understand in hoodoo. Hoodoo is not a religion, it is a form of spirituality, but it falls under the realm of ATRs, which stand for African Traditional Religion. So throughout the diaspora, and there are several diasporas, the Jewish diaspora, but specifically the African diaspora, the understanding of spirituality when the enslaved people were taken from their homelands and dispersed through various lands. The different parts of their traditional religion was fragmented and it was taken away. So when they were located into America specifically, they pulled these fragmented pieces together as and combined it with Christianity, and as a result, then you have hoodoo. Now, hoodoo is completely different from voodoo. So, voodoo is a religion and it is based upon Catholicism. So, you'll see people who are practitioners of voodoo, they will they have different saints and they represent the saints of Catholicism. And again, it is under the guise of ATRs and African traditional religions. But with voodoo, you have to be initiated. So everybody cannot practice voodoo. You have to be called, and there are specific steps you have to go through. Similarly, for hoodoo, all people who are considered African American can participate in hoodoo, but it is a closed practice. So they're both closed practices.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I didn't even, wow, that is so cool. Thank you for sharing that. So, what is hoodoo in general?
Yeah, so what I tell people is that hoodoo is Christianity plus ancestral veneration. And in order, well, so it is used through three different books of the Bible, the Psalms, Proverbs, and the Song of Solomon, all three books written by King Solomon in the Old Testament. And then there's the ancestral veneration. So hoodoo, when it comes to ancestral veneration, is the belief that when you are here on earth, there's work to do. There's work to do. And when you pass over into the other life, then there is also work to do as for your ancestors. So there's the belief that after you pass on as an ancestor, your job is to pray, to intervene, to give guidance. But on this walk of life, our goal is to venerate. So when people venerate their ancestors, you'll see it in different ways. People create altars. On those altars, they leave various things. people use wine, they use rum, people leave out cigarettes, people leave out sweets, so small candies. There's the pouring of libations. There are a lot of different ways to venerate the ancestors, and we'll talk about that later on. But I feel like personally, Kathy, in order to really understand hoodoo, I think it's important to kind of recognize different types of religions and places throughout the world because they kind of mirror each other, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about the Christianization of Russia, right? So in Russia, before it became Russia, it was Kiev, and there was a Tsar, and he wanted Kiev to have its own religion as a nation because compared to the rest of Europe at the time, Russia was backwoods. They were kind of farther back along in progress, and they felt like in order to be considered a real nation, they needed a religion to stand upon. So the Tsar at the time sent out different representatives to stake out different forms of religion as a way to come and then to come back and tell them about it so that they could select which religion would fit Russia the best. So these representatives went to mosques, they went to temples, they went to cathedrals, different churches, and they all came back and reported. Now, one of them was like, I really like the mosque. They have incense there, but there's no alcohol. And the Tsar at the time is like, alcohol, without alcohol, there will be the downfall of Russia. They went to different places. So at the end, Kiev or Russia settled on Catholicism. And of course, they chose Catholicism because when you participate in communion, there's wine. So it involves wine. And they felt like overall it was a great fit for the country. So that is on the governmental side. So then you have the normal day-to-day people who, for generations, were practicing their own Slavic religions. During this time, the normal day-to-day people, they were pagan. So they participated in their own source of spirituality that really it comes from nature. So the Tsar at the time gives the ordinance to all these people. He's telling them you need to be at the river, this one river, within 3 days. Anyone who does not get baptized, that does not change their religion, they will be executed. They'll be put to death. So all these people are being baptized. Now, although they're doing the actions, their beliefs are still rooted in what they've known their whole life and what their ancestors have known their whole life. So they are forced and they're put in this situation where they still want to practice their spirituality, but they have to do it under the guise of Christianity. And that is it can be seen to this day. So if you were to go and visit Russia, you would see these old Catholic churches and cathedrals built on top of nature, essentially, on top of old tree stumps, on top of sacred lands and sacred grounds. And in so many ways, at least in my perception, it relates back to hoodoo. It relates back to what happened to those enslaved people who were forced to take on Christianity, and they still had their own generations, eons, years of their own spiritual beliefs, and they were forced to practice it. So they did it under the guise of Christianity.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing. Man,
Mhm.
like, can't believe that there's just so much history that we don't even talk about, but thank you for even sharing that. So, you know, with that example that you gave us, about Russia, so it's like an example for us in America, right? Like, where everything is, I guess, not forced in a way. I guess, I don't know. But as long as you still have that ancestral belief. And I remember you mentioned, because if you have a podcast version of this too, you were talking about how um you have to be African American, right, in order to uh believe in hoodoo, right? Or you are already cast as believing in hoodoo if you are African American, right?
Yeah, I would say that if you are African American, because it's not a religion,
Oh,
but it's already embedded within your day-to-day practice.
gotcha. Okay.
So with food, the belief is that as simply just by existing, simply by being a Black person, breaking generational curses and venerating your ancestors, you yourself um are the sacrifice. You yourself are doing the work. You yourself, simply by existing, are a practitioner of hoodoo, right? So I think that is a great way to look at it. Now, there's some people, and like I said, it is deeply embedded within like our day-to-day routines. I can give you a great example. So, during New Year's, Black people often cook black eyed peas right before New Year's. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
No. So yes, that's for good luck. That's for good luck. And it's rooted back into like ancestral just traditions and stuff like that. Or if you get bad luck, you throw salt over your shoulder.
Mm.
Or if you want to bring in money, you throw pennies up under the couch. Just being like highly superstitious, but it's rooted in traditions, and it's so normalized down here. You would be practicing it and you wouldn't even notice it because that is the way of life here. I know specifically down here, Black people are superstitious about splitting poles because that brings bad luck. So if me and you are walking down the alleyway and there's a telephone pole in the middle of it and we split it, that brings bad luck. So you'll literally see someone snatching someone and you'll bring them over this way because we don't want bad luck. Another example, and I believe a lot of Black people, Black women specifically, we don't believe in putting our purses on the ground, because if you put your purse on the ground, then you will have a loss of money. So like no matter where you go, a Black person will ask, can I put my purse in a chair? Can I put it on a couch? And it's looked down upon to see somebody to have their purse on the ground, because that means that you don't want an influx of money coming in. So it's all these superstitions, and as well as like being connected and being one with the earth, like hoodoo practitioners, root workers specifically, they use herbs, they use whatever is available within their area to create medical cures for ailment. I know people use elderberry in order to create like ointments. They take that type of vitamin to help with mental capacity. People use the flower of Jericho in order to do divination. There are a lot of things that people use just from their normal day-to-day environment. And what that is really, that's kind of signet to African religions. So like a great in Africa, those people, they believed in polytheism. So here, and most Western religions believe in monotheism. So that is the belief in one God. But especially with Ifa, they're polytheistic. So they believe in many gods. And what they believe is that there are spirits within different natural elements. So a great example you could see with the drum in Africa. So if I'm getting ready to create a drum, what will I need? I'll need wood. I'll need hide skin from an animal. So before I go and get the wood, I have to pray to the tree because there's a deity in the tree. I have to ask it for permission. I have to ask it to bless the instrument I'm about to be able to make. I have to ask the spirits and deities within the tree if they'll help create the music. Before you sacrifice the animal to get the hide skin, you have to ask permission. You have to thank it, give it reverence, and then you have to be in the right mindset before you do that and take it. So it's this sense of reverence, and that is passed down through the diaspora, and it's located itself in different regions of the American South, as well as South America.
Oh, so cool. So when you're explaining, hoodoo, it reminds me exactly of the Chinese tradition too, like where we have different deities, different gods, right? Like it's kind of like Buddhism in a sense where, we do pray to the ancestors, which is so cool. I didn't know that hoodoo is like so similar in that sense. So,
Most definitely.
yeah. That's awesome. It's like a, you know, a practice, like for me, hoodoo is kind of like my Chinese tradition where, we would pray to the ancestors. Like I didn't know why, we just did it, it's like an everyday practice. And like you were talking about doing like certain things for bad luck, etc. Like this, the Chinese culture is all about that. Like, wearing red is for good fortune, etc. So it's like super common. And it's crazy how we're not taught this, this is so cool to learn. And I think we're like so similar in that sense too, because, we're not like what you said, we just don't believe in one God. We believe in many different deities and gods, and we believe in, the earth, and we practice a lot of herbal medicine as well, in our Chinese culture. So that's so cool. And just
Most definitely.
having you talk about it, it's just like, whoa, I didn't know all this. Like, this is so cool. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And like with hoodoo, it's like a spirituality thing, right? So would you say you're a very spiritual person in general then?
I am. I'm a very spiritual person. I mean, I'm in Mississippi. That's the culture. Um,
Mhm.
I'm a believer of God. I do believe in God. I think that it would be completely ignorant to live on this earth and believe that we're here by coincidence and not by design. And I feel like there is a purpose in everything. I'm also a believer that there is a spirit to things and places. I think that we've gotten to the point, especially in modernity, where we feel like ancient rituals, ancient practices, technology, old word of mouth is just crazy talk because we have more access to technology. And I feel like it's ignorant to think that those people didn't know what they were talking about and didn't know, just because they don't have access to the technology we have now.
Yeah. That's so true. And, I love talking about spirituality because in general, I think we're all these spiritual beings, right? We're all here as like this beautiful soul being, and then we're just like kind of in this human body as, an experience. And like, spirituality is a huge piece, but in the United States, like, we're taught at a young age, like if our school system, like they teach us not to be different. They teach us to try to be all the same and like not tap into our spirituality, our powers, and our own roots, right? Like I have my own Chinese traditions, you have your own hoodoo traditions, And so it's beautiful that now we both get to have the platform to share this and to come together to be able to share this together, which is beautiful.
Most definitely.
Yeah. So, did you want to share anything else that you want people to know about Hoodoo or just in general about like Black History Month that, is super important for us to know because in general, like, I'm not gonna say it, but I am, but our school system's very, very one way, right? But it's like I'm sure there's a lot that we're not taught. So, anything that you think we should all know?
We can talk about divination for a second. I think divination is a really cool topic. What do you know about divination, if anything?
Nothing. So, yeah.
So the word divination essentially is a way to talk to the divine through
Mm,
tools and messages. And I think the most common form of divination is tarot. But that comes from pagan European witchcraft. I think that one of the most interesting ways that hoodoo practitioners use divination is through like bone reading, rock reading, or stick reading. So in the Bible, the Bible, especially the Old Testament, they talk a lot about different forms of divination, like King Solomon and David and King Solomon's son. They were getting ready to go into battle, and before they got into battle, King Solomon went to go see a soothsayer. He went to a fortune teller to give him a prediction about the outcome of the war, and she predicted that the war would end negatively. Also in the Old Testament, they talk about this practice that is practiced now in hoodoo, and it is the throwing of bones or sticks. So essentially, one side of a bone is marked and you throw it up into the air, and based on the way that it lands, um you can get a message from the divine, from God. And people still practice this today. I know with Santeria, people use divination through like egg washes, like to see whether or not there's a negative spirit attached to them. They'll take an egg and they'll rub it all over their heads and their bodies, and then they'll crack it into like a glass. And based off of how the yolk is running in the glass, in within a glass of water, it tells you. So like if the yolk is at the top, then that's negative or positive. If it runs down, you can read it, but it takes years to be able to develop that type of sight as well as understanding. Now, what is really interesting, I thought Tabitha Brown. Do you know who Tabitha Brown is? She's a huge social media star. She's this black woman in 2020. She started cooking vegan meals. She has this huge afro, and she's a very big like Christian woman. She's a great influencer. She was just on the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne the God and DJ Envy, and she was talking about her spiritual gifts. Now, Tabitha Brown is like super famous because during like 2021, Wendy Williams was online and she was shading her. She was shading the fuck out of her. And she was talking about her life and her family in a negative way. And Tabitha Brown got on the internet and was like, "I'ma pray for you." And then as soon as she said that, like Wendy Williams ended up, you remember when she fell over on her show, she had that stroke. Her mental capacity was lost, her fortune, her money. So people have always speculated that that she had some type of spiritual protection around her. But when she got on the Breakfast Club recently, she talked about the fact that she was a seer, and that is someone who has the gift of clairvoyancy. I think another, you can also see that if you've ever watched the Misadventures of Sabrina, the remix on Netflix. There's a black character, her name is like Rose, but her eyesight is completely taken away, and her grandmother at the time was given what they call the cunning, or the ability to see and to protect or predict the future. So Tabitha was talking about her specific gift, where God will send her a message, and she just has a general knowing, or she has an understanding of the presence of God and what God sounds like, because God shows her things. And like we were talking about earlier, I definitely believe that people, specifically like gifted people, have spiritual gifts from God. You know, people are clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, and it kind of ranges. And again, that goes with practicing and developing your spiritual gifts, becoming more aligned with divine, becoming more aligned with nature. So I find it very interesting when people talk about instances like that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's so true. And I totally believe that all of us have these gifts if we want to all tap into it. And, you know, but more people like people have more of like that clairvoyance or clear audience, right? Or clear sentient like powers when they're more in tune with themselves. And so that is true. Tapping into divinity is super important for all of us. And like you said, walking into nature and like just getting, to know nature is a great way to like get your power back, to even tap into your spirituality. That's so true. I think
I love the fact that you said that. I think a large running theme throughout Hoodoo is water. So, or idea, yeah, of water. So that just reminded me of a flood of information. My God. Harriet Tubman was called the Black Moses. I don't know if you knew that. They called her the Black Moses. And it was because it was believed that she was able to see and spoke to her. And that is how she was able to liberate, I think, at least 50 enslaved people from the South and got them all the way up to Canada. But I say that water is important, of course, because of the story of Moses. And there's so many songs within the culture, like Go Down Moses, God's gonna trouble the water. But it is the belief that water is a restitution, a restoration place, or the stillness of water. God is going to trouble the water. The fact that once you get into the water, your enemies will become sacrosanct. They're annihilated once they become the water. But water is a safe place, and I think that that is a really cool theme of our history. Just because, like, as African Americans, quiet is kept, there's always been rumors of African Americans being the chosen ones or God's chosen people. So there are always parallels and comparisons to the African American community to God's chosen people. And you see that all throughout the history, especially with the displacement of us and our ability to fight back. Yeah, and our ability to resist. So I think that it's very interesting to see people navigate within this. I also think it's interesting because when I was telling you about monotheism, polytheism, so when I was taking a class in university, um my professor was talking about how as time goes, the world, the way that we accept religion changes. So at the beginning, we all were monotheistic. We all believed in several deities. And as time progressed, we all became monotheistic. So, like, we all believed that there was only one God, and we consolidated everything into one. Instead of seeing water and thinking of fertility or this and that, we all put all those rights within one God. So as time progresses, many theorists believe that we won't believe in religion at all. And we're starting to see this huge exodus, especially in the Black community, where young millennials, Gen Z, they're exiting the Black church, and they're starting to accept spirituality within their own hands. There's the belief that you do not have to be within a church or within a religious temple in order to have a divine relationship or a close walk with God. And they're kind of picking up on things on their own understanding in their own time. So I think it's really interesting to think. Okay, I think it's interesting to think about the Black church outside of Hoodoo and within Hoodoo. Like I was saying, there is uh a part of the church, a denomination of the church, that is Kojic, which stands for Church of God in Christ, and it's specifically an African American denomination. And the founder of the Kojic Church was a root worker. He was a conjure man. Um, and he believed in divination. He was a seer. He felt like God talked to him. And so, like, the roots run so deep that even small things you don't notice that you're doing, you're still participating in it. Yeah.
That's so cool. It's so true though. And spirituality, it's kind of learning, like the new generation is learning to just grasp spirituality their own way. And religion is just so on the strict side, right? And so, you can practice hoodoo anywhere, any day, like what you were saying. It's not a religion, it's more of like a day-to-day practice, like ancestral ways to live life, right?
And I thought that you said something super interesting but at the beginning of our conversation, and you were like, in some ways, whether or not some minorities, they were forced to believe in Christianity, and that kind of reminded me of the slave Bible. Have you ever heard of a slave Bible before?
No, I have not. No.
Okay, so when enslaved people specifically were brought to America, they were given a Bible. And you have to remember, during enslavement, enslaved people were not allowed to read. They were not allowed to learn how to read or write, but they were given a Bible. So the Ethiopian Bible, it's like this big. It has 88 books in it.
Mm.
The regular King James Bible is like this big. It has 66 chapters in it. The slave Bible, it's like small, and it's because all these different pieces and parts and passages within the Bible were taken out, and it was like a form of propaganda. So they use this Bible as a way to justify enslavement. So the Christianity was enforced upon them as a justification. They were saying, you are enslaved to us, and it was because it was God's will for you to be able to do so. And there were so many passages taken out about slave rights, about freedom, any common theme that surrounds the topic of freedom, completely removed from the Bible, and justifications were emphasized and added into it. So it was a form of manipulation. And that goes back and connects a full circle as to why they were forced to practice their form of hoodoo under the guise of Christianity as a way to stay connected to their heritage and ancestry.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. And it makes sense because they had to find a way to make sure like these people were in order. And in order to do that, they had to obviously manipulate them. And they did that through this slavery Bible. Wow. Thank you
Through
for
religion.
Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. Man, we learned so much today. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, we got to do a part two. There's just so much to learn about this topic. So thank you again for taking the time to share. But before we end, let people know where we can find you more, how they can find you more.
Definitely, you can find me on Instagram at dang.morgs. That's DANG.MORGS. My Afrocentric podcast on Instagram is at the Afrocentric Podcast. Same thing on TikTok. My social media platform, the Afrocentric Podcast, is available on all streaming services. It is an audio only platform because I want people to hear me instead of, seeing and getting distracted. But it's available on all listening platforms as Apple Pod, Pandora, Spotify, iHeart Music, Joloff Radio, anywhere you can think. That's where I can be found.
Amazing. And if you want to learn more about Hoodoo, I will also link your episode here below in the description so people can go more in depth if they want to learn more. Thank you again for hopping on today and spending an hour with me. I had such a fantastic time and I learned so much. Thank you, Morgan. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much for choosing to be Afrocentric today.
Of course.